يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن خير الكلام كلام الله عز وجل وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدع وكل بدعة دلالة وكل دلالة في النار وبعد. We begin as always by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, acknowledging that He is the one that we worship, He is the one that we seek aid from, and He is the one that we turn to in repentance. We seek refuge in Allah from the evil of our own selves and the evil of our own actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, there is none to mislead him, and whoever is misled, there is none that can guide him except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. I testify that there is none worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has no partners whatsoever. And I also testify that Muhammad is his slave and his messenger. After that, the best speech is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the worst of all the matters are the newly invented matters into the religion as worship. And every newly invented matter into worship is a innovation and is going astray. And everything that leads to going astray leads to the hellfire. We welcome the brothers and the sisters to a new series of lessons. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us sincerity in learning His religion and learning about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and learning about His Tawheed. And we welcome the brothers to this, brothers and sisters to this lesson. The first of inshallah many, by Allah's tawfiq, is the study of the great subject, the very important subject, the subject of Tawheed. Yani singling out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone with worship. And the book that we will be studying inshallah is the great book Kitab al-Tawheed, by the great Imam, the Shaykh, the reviver of the deen, Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb rahimahullah ta'ala. But before we begin delving into the book, the scholars usually what they do when they teach these type of books is they'll bring a brief biography of the author and a brief discussion about the subject matter of the book as well. So inshallah what we plan to do before we go into the book is have a look at the biography of this great Imam, this great reviver of the deen, this great mujahid of spreading the da'wah of Tawheed. We'll have a look at his biography, and we also want to have a look at some of the accusations that were made against him. Because shaitan will never be happy, will never be relaxed, unless he's fighting against the spread of the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when somebody comes along and Allah gives him the tawfiq to spread the deen, the shaitan will always fight against that person. So we want to look at some of the accusations that the shayateen put forward against this great Imam, against this great Shaykh. Also we'll be looking at maybe not this lesson, but introduction to the subject matter of Tawheed as well. So we ask the dear brothers and sisters to be patient with us in learning, since studying knowledge takes patience. Studying knowledge needs patience, and a student of knowledge is anybody who's looking for knowledge to raise off ignorance from himself and seek the pleasure of Allah and enter into His paradise. So we look at we're patient with seeking knowledge, and even if it's something very, very small, even learning just one hadith or one ayah, we are patient with doing so. So we'll begin firstly with the biography of this great Imam, this great Shaykh. He the titles that they give him is Shaykh al-Islam. And these titles, like Shaykh al-Islam and Imam and Shaykh, and some of them are reserved only for the best of the scholars. So for example, Shaykh al-Islam, when somebody mentions Shaykh al-Islam, the first person that comes to mind when that terminology is mentioned, is the great scholar Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, who died 725 al-Hijrah. But due to the great efforts and the spread of da'wah by Allah's permission, by Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, he's also given the title Shaykh al-Islam. So he was a great reviver, a great imam, a great reformer, Shaykh al-Islam, Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb. So his full name is Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb ibn Sulaiman ibn Ali ibn Muhammad at-Tamimi rahimahullah ta'ala. Okay, so Shaykh al-Islam Imam Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb ibn Sulaiman ibn Ali ibn Muhammad at-Tamimi rahimahullah ta'ala. So he's from the Arabian Peninsula. He was born in the year 1115 al-Hijrah. So it's 1115 al-Hijrah, corresponding to 1703 in Christian era, yani the Western calendar, 1703. So he was born in that time. And he was born in the city of Uyayna, which is about 70 kilometers northwest of Riyadh, which is the capital of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So this is where he was born. And it's a very strategic place because here this area was cut off from other areas because due to the mountain ranges. This is basically central of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the central part of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but it's largely cut off from other areas due to the mountain ranges that were there. Because we'll have a look at that later on as well, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the wisdom that Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab came into this area. So Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah, he was brought up in a religious family. He was brought up in a religious family, and his father was a scholar. His father was Abdul-Wahhāb, okay, who was the son of Sulaiman. Okay, so he belonged to a highly respectable and scholarly family, and his father was a scholar. Okay, and this shows us that when one of the benefits of raising your children religiously is that maybe from our children there will come people who will become scholars, and this is the thing that is needed for the Muslim Ummah right now. We need to produce scholars, because when we look at the population of the Muslims are so many and so large in number, but as regards to those who have knowledge, very, very few, very, very few select that have real, proper, strong knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah and the way of the Salaf. So one of the main things that we need to do is to produce scholars, and we do that firstly by having sincerity, because we're not doing this to show off. We're not saying I'm not raising my son so I can be proud and say, oh, look at my son, he's memorized so much Quran, so many hadith, and he's he leads the prayer in the masjid. No, none of that. It's sincerely for Allah's sake. Like we know from the past how the prophets and the mothers of prophets raised their dedicated their children for Allah's sake. So it's very, very important that we have that our children have a very strong religious influence, because it's good for them. It's good for them. They might not understand it at a young age, but when they grow older, they will appreciate that their parents took the time to teach them the religion of Islam, because that's when they go into the real world and they will need those tools to survive in worldly environments. So Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah came from a religious family. His ancestors, his father, his grandfather, they were scholars and they were leaders at that time, because they had the ability to read and write. Because we have to remember, at the time in these type of places, people didn't have schools. People didn't have schools to go to. So it's not like now that every child must go to a school and he has to learn how to read and write. In those days, there was very few people that could read and write. So we find, even from Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah, that he had memorized the Quran at a very early age. He had memorized the Quran by the age of 10. He had memorized the Quran by the age of 10. And he had learned how to read and write. So when we see our scholars, even nowadays, in recent times you find, for example, Shaykh Zayd al-Madkhali, rahimahullah ta'ala, who is from the south of Saudi Arabia. They said he went to school and he studied. To us now, it's like, wow, that's nothing big. We all do that. No, at that time there were very, very few teachers, very, very few people that could read and write, and we can see this, we can understand this when we have, for example, refugees that come to, say, different countries. So, for example, you may go to an Arab country, but you only speak English. So you're going to have to go to somebody who knows both languages to be able to translate for you. So in the same way, you'll find that in those times, the background was, there were very few people that were educated. So Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, rahimahullah, came from a very religious family, educated family, that so much so that he had learnt the Quran by the age of 10, because he's studying from his father, learning from his father. And Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, rahimahullah, he read the books of tafsir, the books of hadith and fiqh. But he was particularly interested with the works of the great scholars like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah. So remember that knowledge can only be gained by studying, meaning that you read, you revise, you memorize, and try to understand what you've taken. So you read it, you read the hadith or the ayah, you try to understand from the works of the scholars, understand what does that mean, because Arabic is a very, very powerful language, and the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the speech of Allah, the uncreated speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's very, very profound, deep in meaning. Okay, so we go back to the tafsir to find out what. So we learn knowledge. So it's very, very important. So he was really impressed by the books of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim. And the scholars mention that the Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, rahimahullah, he actually revived the books of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim. So it's amazing how, for many, many hundreds of years, you remember Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah died in 725. And Ibn Qayyim just after that, and that these books were hidden, or these books were not available. They were in manuscript form in somebody's house or in some sort of book collection, and a lot of these books weren't available because they didn't have the means to print like we have now. But in those days, it was very difficult to get these books. So Shaykh Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb actually revived the books of Ibn Taymiyyah, revived the books. You'll find indications now and then from, say, for example, Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, who died in 900 and something, al-Hijrah. You'll find indications from Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah said this, okay, in various parts of his books, in Fath al-Bari and other places. But you won't find a concentrated study or da'wah of these books, a call to the books of Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, because they weren't available. The aqeedah at that time was the aqeedah of the Asha'ira. The Asha'ira are those who twist some of the ayat and hadith regarding the asma wa sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that was the prevalent da'wah at that time. So these books were hidden because these books were the books of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah. They took on the Asha'ira and they explained the Aqidah Salafiyyah so clearly. So if somebody read those books, they would become Salafi clearly. Anybody who reads the books of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim with sincerity, Allah makes him a Salafi. Allah will put them on the manhaj as-Salafi straight away, because there's no other way except for that. Except for somebody whose heart is sick, an extremist, deviant, they will read anything. They will even take the ayat of the Quran and twist the meanings. But anybody who sincerely reads the books of Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim, straight away they will become on the methodology of the Salaf. So he actually revived, Ibn Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb revived. This is very important, very, very important, because it shows us that Allah gives tawfiq, Allah gives success, Allah gives support and capability to certain individuals, those whom He chooses, okay, to spread His da'wah, okay. So, and reviving these books is, now we have them everywhere now. The books of Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, and the government of Saudi Arabia prints these books and gives them out for free as well, and we're talking about huge collections, volumes of books by Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah, because those books were based upon the Aqidah Salafiyyah. When Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, rahimahullah, was very young, and he reached the age of maturity, his father married him off when he was only 12 years old. He married him off when he was only 12 years old. And that shows you the responsibility or the level of Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, rahimahullah. In those days, we find that, children were capable of doing so much more than we find children nowadays, okay? Responsibilities, okay? Maybe they had to look after the livestock, the animals, the sheep and the goats and these type of things. Maybe they had to take out the camels for grazing and these type of things. So we find that, that the children at that time, they were mature. They were mature because they had responsibilities. They had responsibilities to take care of their parents and families and livestock and these type of things. So we find that Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, rahimahullah, his father married him off when he was only 12 years old. So he had memorized the Quran by 10, and 12 years old he's already married. And it shows us the responsibility and the status of Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, rahimahullah. After that, he set out to do Hajj to Mecca, and he went there and he benefited from the scholars there, and then he proceeded on to Medina and he studied there. And remember, when they talk about traveling to Mecca and Medina and these type of things, these journeys were very, very difficult. It's not like nowadays we sit in an air-conditioned aeroplane and fly off. It wasn't like that. It was traveling for weeks and months to get to Mecca, and all the hardships that they faced during those journeys. So going to Mecca was a big thing, but he went at a very young age to go study. And in Medina, he studied under one Shaykh whose name was Shaykh Abdullah ibn Ibrahim bin Sa'id al-Najdi, who was also from this area, because this area of Riyadh is called Najd, the area, not the city, but the area is called Najd. Okay, so this great scholar that he met in Medina was also Shaykh Abdullah al-Najdi. And another great scholar that he studied under was the Shaykh Muhammad Hayat Sindhi. Shaykh Muhammad Hayat Sindhi, rahimahullah, was also a teacher in the Prophet's Masjid at that time. Now, these were great scholars of hadith, like Shaykh Muhammad Hayat Sindhi. He has explanations of Sunan Nisa'i, Sunan Ibn Majah, and other books. He has explanations of these books, which are available until today. Now, when we look at this situation, we find that, hang on, Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb is a student of knowledge, okay? And he went and studied over there. So why was it that the da'wah wasn't widespread? In Saudi Arabia, in Najd, we'll see later on, how there was widespread shirk, widespread bid'ah, innovations and all types of evil practices that go completely against the Quran and Sunnah. And yet you have scholars in Medina and Mecca and these type of places. Why wasn't there any? It shows us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives tawfiq to whom He chooses. Allah gives success to whom He chooses. Not to every single individual. You find, for example, a person who busies himself with learning the religion, okay, learning the deen, but he doesn't have the ability to be able to give a lecture, for example, or he doesn't have the ability to go out and spread the da'wah, call the people to the deen, okay? But each and every single individual has his ability. So, for example, now, and this is very important, especially for our brothers and sisters or follow the Salafi methodology, is that we have to take this opportunity to give da'wah. We have to learn the religion and teach it to the people, even if it's just one statement, even if it's just one kalima, okay? Teaching it to the people, to remind the people, if it's just one hadith. And Allah has given us so many avenues, means to spread this da'wah. So for example, okay, maybe I'm not so eloquent, in talking, but I can send a WhatsApp message. I can give somebody a book. I can give somebody a audio message or lecture or something. I can spread it like that, and you'll be surprised of how people, come to the religion just by one small statement. One small statement, that's all you might need, to be able to spread the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's very important that we get active, because when we're not active, this is when the shaitan comes in. Shaitan comes in. Yeah, we're praying. Yeah, I'm still following the deen. Yeah, I've grown my beard. I've started to wear my hijab. I pray and everything, right? But, the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that you keep moving. You got to keep moving, okay? So, yeah, I'm doing everything, okay? That's sufficient for me to get into paradise. No, for the person who's Salafi, the person who follows the way of the Salafi methodology, he pushes himself, he exerts himself to spread the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. Spread the deen. So which any way that you can, maybe you buy a book and you give it to somebody. Maybe you send out a WhatsApp message. And you could give it to somebody who's like totally not practicing. And they might even ask you questions. And there's so much that can be like a springboard of effect. So tawfiq comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, we find like Shaykh Muqbil al-Wadi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he was a scholar of hadith in Yemen. And he was in a village, okay? In a village, okay? And he was a farmer, okay? But he had the knowledge of the hadith. But this one man, Allah gave him tawfiq because of sincerity. Because of sincerity, Allah gave him the ability to, spread the Da'waatus Salafiyyah in Yemen. Even till today, he's still remembered as a great scholar of hadith in Yemen. And likewise, we find Shaykh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani, rahimahullah, a great scholar of hadith. He was always in the library. He had a few lessons here and there. He would teach, but not to the extent that that he would go out and spend all his time teaching. No, he was learning the religion. He was purifying the fabricated hadith from the authentic hadith. And he compiled such a big library of books that he wrote, or checked of hadith, that even till today, people who write PhDs and master theses in regarding the religion, they refer back to his books. So his effect on the da'wah was so wide, it's incredible. That was just one man, that sincerity. So we find Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, rahimahullah, okay, one man, okay, student of knowledge, went around learning the deen, and he managed, by Allah's permission, this was Allah's plan, that converted the whole of the Arabian Peninsula to the correct path of Tawheed. One man, So it shows us that we, having sincerity, having tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so much can be accomplished. Not that we look for titles or status, or we want a position. I want to be the leader. I want to organize. No, it's not that. It's about teaching the people, spreading the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So this is why we find that Muhammad Abdul-Wahhāb, he studied under scholars. And Allah gave him tawfiq for that. Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb also went on to other places. For example, he traveled to Iraq, Basra, and other places as well. And when he went there, this is where he actually had the idea for the foundation of Kitab al-Tawheed, the book, inshallah, that we're going to study, Kitab al-Tawheed. The foundation for the writing of that book, he actually started writing that book when he was in Iraq, okay? Because there were so many shrines and graves that were built up, and people would go to these tombs and shrines and make dua to the dead, and they would sacrifice for the dead, and they go there ask these inmates of graves and stuff. So that's where the foundation came for Kitab al-Tawheed. That the people need to be taught the basics of the religion. They need to be brought back to the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And this is what is needed even now. Even now, especially in many of the Muslim countries, especially in the Indian subcontinent and in Morocco, in Egypt, and many other countries, you'll find that for example, you'll find a small house, and I've seen this with my own eyes, you'll see a small house, like a room, okay? In the middle of nowhere, you'll see this small room, and they'll have 2 doors or 3 doors, and they'll have a grave inside. And they'll have a grave inside that room. And people will come in, make dua to the grave, ask the inmate of the grave things, and walk out from the other door. And I've seen this with my own eyes. And I've seen where women come and they make sajda to a grave. They make sajda to a grave. This was in Pakistan. So a woman making sajda to a grave. So it shows us that even now we need the da'wah of Tawheed. Bringing the people back to sincerely worship Allah alone. That when they make sajda, they only make it to Allah. When they make dua, they only make it to Allah. When they seek refuge, they only seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Tawheed is needed, greatly, even in our time. As regards the next point is the condition of Najd, this area of Riyadh. We find in those days that people were would indulge in deeds of shirk. There was so much. It was incredible that people would go like to graves, or they would go to trees or stones or even caves to ask for things which only Allah could give them. Only Allah could give them. For example, there was a tree that a woman would go and hug the tree. A woman would go and hug the tree and ask the tree for children. Ask the tree to give them children. Okay? The people would go to like certain rocks, and they would regard those rocks as sacred, as religious. And they would go to these rocks and make dua to a rock. A rock which has no power whatsoever. It can't help itself, because if you came along with something hard and sharp, you could actually break that rock. Why are you going to something which has no ability? But this was the situation at that time. And, it's the same situation in certain countries. Like, for example, there would be crazy people, insane people. And the people say, oh, this is a wali of Allah. This is somebody who's close to Allah. The guy's crazy. He's got a mental problem. And people would say, oh no, he's somebody who's close to Allah. He's close to Allah. And they would have these type of things. And there was a lot of magicians, soothsayers, and all these type of things. And this was happening also in Mecca and Medina. These type of practices were happening in Mecca and Medina. And at that time, it was the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, that was controlling Mecca and Medina, and they would allow these type of practices. They didn't stop these practices. They didn't curb these practices of shirk. They allowed these type of things. The buildings of shrines in Medina. Can you imagine? In Mecca, shrines. They allowed these practices. And that's why it was very important for Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb rahimahullah to start spreading his da'wah. So what happened was that now Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb rahimahullah, he's ready now. He's gone out and learnt the deen. He's seen the situation of the Muslims, and now he's come back and he has sincerity and he wants to start spreading the deen. So what happens is that he starts writing letters of da'wah, calling the different areas and the people back to Tawheed. A lot of these letters you'll find are available in and some were small booklets as well that he wrote, inviting them to Tawheed. And you'll find these in collections of the Fatawa and the collections of his books. They've compiled his writings and things, these type of things. So you'll find that in his books, rahimahullah ta'ala. So he wrote out to scholars in Mecca, to Medina, to Yemen, and other places. And then he started taking journeys while he was in Uyayna, which here in the Najd, Riyadh area. He would take out, he would visit other places which were close by, Huraymala, Ahsa, different areas, to call the people back to Tawheed. Then he came back to Uyayna. Okay, it shows us another benefit we get from this is that it is very important to take out rihla, take out journeys to seek knowledge. Yeah, it is very important to take a journey to seek knowledge, and this is the path of the Salaf of old. The Salaf of old, from the Sahaba right down to our time now, you'll find the people of on the correct methodology. They will make a journey to seek knowledge, to ask a question, to get some benefit. They might have something that they don't understand. It will actually take a journey to go visit that person, and we find this being happening amongst the companions, because at the time of the Sahaba, they spread out to spread the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they went to many different countries, as far as Iraq and further, and far as even into some of them. It's mentioned that they went close, after the Sahaba, went close into Europe. There's narrations of the Tabi'in or Atba' Tabi'in, their successors and their followers, going as far as Europe, to spread the da'wah. So companions, to check something, they would go visit. An issue comes up. They said, I think Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he has the knowledge of this issue. Let's go take a journey. So they would pack their bags, say goodbye to their families, get the camels ready and horses or whatever, caravans ready, and they would make a journey to seek knowledge. So likewise, Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb rahimahullah travelled around. He travelled around to gain knowledge. And this is something we need to practice even till today. Even till today, we can jump on a plane, save your money, jump on a plane, trust in Allah, and go and seek knowledge from the scholars. Whether it's if you can only come for a week or 2 weeks or a month or a few days, we advise the people to do this, because this is the way of the Salaf. So then Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb came back to Uyayna. At that time, we find that the Najd area was tribal. It was a tribal area. Not like Mecca, Medina, Taif, Jeddah, these areas, which is the Hijaz, which is the western side of Saudi Arabia. This was controlled by the Ottomans, the Turkish. But the Najd was tribal. So every tribe had its own area. And the ruler of Uyayna, this area, small area, was Uthman ibn Hamad Muammar. Okay, so he was the ruler of that area, like the chief of that tribe, of that area. So he welcomed Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, because he was originally from that place. Okay, he was originally from that place. So now Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb started his lessons. He started teaching the people. And he started teaching the people to free themselves from this religious pollution. Because there were many tombs and graves and trees that people used to worship. So he started educating them. Don't turn to that, turn to Allah. Okay? So the people in the surrounding area started coming to him. Okay? And his reputation started to spread. If you need to know about Islam, go to such and such Shaykh. He's there in your aim. So what happened was that there's another area called al-Ahsa and its surrounding areas. And there was a leader there. The ruler of that place was Sulaiman ibn Urayyir. And he came to know of the popularity of the Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb. So he got worried. He got worried that Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb was going to take over his authority, even though Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb rahimahullah followed the way of the Salaf by just educating the people. Educating the people, because the people need to be ready, and they have to be ready to accept the implementation of the Sharia. They need to be ready to implement the Sharia. Okay, because if the people aren't ready, the whole implementation of implementing the Sharia will fall. So, for example, likewise, we find in the Taliban, for example, they went around forcing the religion upon the people. The people in that country, they don't understand the deen. They're very far from the religion. They don't, don't have the knowledge of the deen. And you want to force it upon them? And obviously they're going to make mistakes. And then what, you want to punish them and kill them and carry out capital punishment, even when the people don't know? This is crazy. This is crazy. This is not the right way. The right way is to educate the people. You have to teach the people, and the people have to be ready to accept the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't start punishing the people and start harming the people for the sake of, yes, we have to establish Islam. No, that's not how it's done. And this is how we find is the way of the Khawarij and the extremists, the terrorists. This is what they do. So Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, rahimahullah, was just teaching. He didn't need, he wasn't thinking about, taking over power, authority, and nothing, because he was just teaching. And this is the way of the Salafi and the Salafi scholars, that they just teach the people, and the success comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what happened was that this Sulaiman who was in charge of al-Ahsa, he went to the leader of Uwaina, Amir Uthman, and he said, I want you to kill the Shaykh. I want you to kill him. So this Amir Uthman of this area, he was like too weak to be able to reject Amir Sulaiman. Okay, so what happened? Amir Uthman of Uwaina, he said to the Shaykh, he said, look, I can't face up to him, because it's too strong or too powerful, right? So what you should do is that you should migrate to Dar'iyah. Migrate from this Uwaina to Dar'iyah. Dar'iyah now is actually a part of Riyadh. And it's a very beautiful area here in Riyadh. So the people of Dar'iyah, they already knew about the da'wah of the Shaykh. And they liked the Shaykh. So they accepted the Shaykh. So it shows us wisdom. It shows us wisdom. Because Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab could have said, no, I'm going to stay in Uwaina. This is my birthplace. I'm going to stay here. And I'm going to, I'm not going to accept what he says. I'm going to fight him. No, he didn't do that. He used wisdom. So it shows us that it's very important for us to have wisdom in giving da'wah and in our dealings, that we have to have wisdom. So he moved to Dar'iyah. Now the ruler of Dar'iyah area was the Amir Muhammad ibn Saud, rahimahullah ta'ala. Amir Muhammad ibn Saud. Now this name is very, very important. Why? Because with the success from Allah, Muhammad Abdul Wahhab joined and Amir Muhammad ibn Saud. They united because he was a ruler. They united, and when they united, Allah gave them success. Allah gave them success in being able to establish the da'wah. Okay, so this name is very important. So he was the founder of the first the Saudi dynasty, and the first, the authority, the first government, as it were, at that time. So Muhammad ibn Saud, rahimahullah ta'ala, and he was a religious man. He would attend the lessons of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. And remember, in those days, these type of people, they used to memorize the books of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Like Kitab al-Tawheed, this was when he had written Kitab al-Tawheed, this was memorized by even like people would clean the streets or clean the cleaners. They would memorize these books. Why? Because these books were very easy to understand, very easy to comprehend and to memorize, because they're ayat of the Quran, hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So it's very important for us as well that if we can, and Allah gives us the capability, to try to memorize some of these the chapters from this book, Kitab al-Tawheed. So Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab united with Amir Muhammad ibn Saud. And our scholars mention, like Shaykh حفظه mentions, that when knowledge is united with the sword, there's nothing that can stop it. Nothing can stop it. So you have the knowledge and you have the authority. But we have to understand, it wasn't that they went out killing people and, looting and taking over places. It wasn't like that. Yeah, there were a few skirmishes here, there, and everything for protection and for these type of things. But the power of da'wah was so strong because you're calling to Tawheed with sincerity. The people accepted. The people accepted. The people accepted this da'wah. So it wasn't as if they needed to, kill and fight and stuff like that. Because in some biographies, you'll find, in translations of certain biographies, they'll talk about, yes, Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhab did jihad and did jihad and did jihad. And you'll find that, when you go back to the Arabic, that it wasn't the case. It wasn't the case. Yeah, he did a jihad of da'wah and jihad of teaching, yes. And some forms of jihad against the shirk, these type of things. But it wasn't like the way they portray it. Yeah, that they went around killing and looting and taking, taking hostages and captives and these type of things. It wasn't the case. That was not the case, okay? So they joined together, Amir Muhammad ibn Saud, rahimullah, and Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhab, and they started spreading the da'wah of Islam. And so they came together and made a pledge for this. They made a pledge to do this. So even till today, you'll find the family of Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhab, rahimullah, al-Shaykh, that's their title. They're given al-Shaykh, the family of the Shaykh, because at that time, the religious authority was called Shaykh, okay? Shaykh, so that was their title. So Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhab and his son and his grandson, they were all given the title of Shaykh. So even till today, you have, for example, Shaykh Salah al-Shaykh, he's the Minister of Islamic Affairs, or you have the Mufti of Saudi Arabia, Shaykh Abdulaziz al-Shaykh, meaning the family of Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhab. So this title still remains. And the title Imam was given to the leaders. Yeah, the title Imam was given to the leaders. So it was Imam Muhammad ibn Saud, okay? Imam. Okay, now they've taken a different title, meaning king or custodian of the two holy places, different titles, but at that time it was Shaykh was for the religious person and Imam was for the Muslim leader. So they came together and they started spreading the da'wah at that time, started educating the people, and then we find that there was a rebellion from some of the people because they didn't like that this da'wah to be spread, and we find that even till today. We'll find people that are not happy with spreading the da'wah of Kitab and Sunnah and the da'wah of Tawheed. So you'll find that there'll be an opposition to this. And this is the Sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That when somebody comes along and he wants to spread something that which is good, you'll find the shayateen always rebelling against that and rejecting that. Then we find that Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhab, rahimahullah, after he had become well established, with Imam Muhammad ibn Saud, rahimahullah, he started sending letters to different countries as well. So a large number of scholars in different countries became affected by his da'wah. So for example, in Yemen, we find the great Imam al-Shawkani, rahimahullah, Imam Shawkani, rahimahullah, became affected by the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhab, the da'wah of Tawheed. You find in India, we find at that time there was a great scholar by the name of Sadiq Hasan Khan, who was affected by the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhab. So the effect of just a small amount of da'wah to Tawheed has amazing results. And these scholars in their own countries, they became voices for the da'wah of Tawheed. So Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhab, rahimahullah, he struggled all his life in spreading the da'wah of Tawheed with the help of Muhammad ibn Saud and the rulers of Dar'iyah at that time. And then he passed away in the year 1206 al-Hijrah. He passed away in 1206 al-Hijrah in 1792 Christian era. 1792, that's the Christian era. As a result of his da'wah, the whole of the Najd, the whole area of Najd had been converted to Tawheed. So the people had abandoned worshipping graves and tombs and shrines and trees and and wrong practices. in all those villages and towns, in all those areas, they started coming to Tawheed. Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb rahimahullah had many great works that he wrote. The most famous of them is like Kitab, at-Tawheed, the book that inshallah we're going to study. Also a very another famous piece of work that he wrote, which is very basic, but it has so many benefits of it because they're foundational. These books are very foundational. The Usul al-Thalatha, the three principles, and Kashf al-Shubahat, and many other books that he wrote, rahimahullah ta'ala. So that's a brief biography of the life of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Let's briefly look at two accusations which were put against Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. The first accusation is that he rebelled against the Ottomans. Yeah, this is the first accusation. Our brother Abu Khadija Abdul-Wahhāb, who's a well-known da'i in the UK and England, and in the forefront of calling the people back to the Sunnah, is well known for his efforts in spreading the Sunnah, حفظه ta'ala. He wrote a very nice piece, and it's available on his website, abukhadija.com, accusation of rebelling against the Ottomans. He mentions very briefly here, we'll just read one paragraph from that and we'll comment on that. He said, there are few scholars in Islamic history that have been more maligned and misrepresented than Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. The Sufis and Shiites, those who ascribe a divinity and superstitious powers to the inhabitants of graves, despise him due to his condemnation of their un-Islamic and counter-orthodox beliefs, which contradict the Quranic commands that demand that worship be directed solely to Allah and supplications of need, aid, refuge and rescue be directed to Him alone. On the other side, there are the radical Kharijite sects, some of whom, so one side is the Sufis and Shiites. Yeah, they hate Muhammad Abdul Wahhab because he is calling the people away from worshipping Allah with shirk to calling to Tawheed. And our brother Abu Khadija mentions that on the other side you find the radical Kharijat sects, yani the Khawarij, the terrorists, these type of people. And what they say some of whom regard him, yani Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, to be the cementer of the throne of Imam Muhammad ibn Saud. So they say, oh, see, he cemented the throne of Muhammad ibn Saud, the founder and the first leader of the Saudi state, and therefore a supporter of tyranny. So this is what their claim is, the terrorists. He said, they seem to have a schizophrenic relationship with him, with Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Some have used him as an example that allows them to rebel against the ruling authority. So some of them, they say, well, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rebelled against the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, so we can do likewise. Because they believe that he sanctioned rebellion against the ruling of the Ottoman Empire. He allowed for that to happen. Yet others have attacked him on the basis, as they claim, that he rebelled against the Ottomans, therefore aided in the downfall of the Khilafah. So others attack him because they say, because he fought against, rebelled against the Ottoman Empire, and because they felt, that's why we support him. Oh, sorry, they attack him. Now, when we look at this situation, we find that there is no justification for what the people say that Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rebelled against the Ottomans. There's no justification for this. Why? Because from his methodology, from his da'wah, we find that his da'wah wasn't the da'wah of the Khawarij. It wasn't the da'wah of rebelling. It was the da'wah of calling the people back to Tawheed. He never mentioned about rebelling against the state. You don't find that in his work. SubhanAllah, it's amazing that even the non-Muslims are so brainwashed by this idea. I had an argument with this non-Muslim once, and he said, yes, Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, and I'm like looking at him thinking, you're not even Muslim, why are you mentioning that name? And he said, even he rebelled against the state. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, and he makes takfir, and he exiting Muslims out of Islam. I said, no, he doesn't. I said, you've read books written by Orientalists, enemies of Islam. But if you go back to the books of Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, you won't find any of these type of statements. And he was surprised. I said, yeah, ask me who's read some of these books, who've researched these type of books to find out what was the status of Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb. So we find there's no justification for that. Firstly, because Najd, this area, was divided. There's a mountain range which divides Saudi Arabia. It divides Hijaz on one side, which is on the western side, and Najd, which is central and towards the eastern side. It's divided. So the Ottoman Empire only controlled, that government only controlled the Hijaz area, the western side. As for central Saudi Arabia, or central Najd, there was no government control. Each area had its own tribe. They had their own ruler, and they fought against each other. They would make up their own rules. They would have their own rules. They would have their own government, in their own small areas. So they were tribal. There was no control. So how can he have rebelled against the Ottoman Empire? He didn't. So it really shows us that they had no justification. That this claim that he rebelled against the Ottomans didn't happen. Secondly, because he was giving da'wah to the people, and the scholars in Mecca and Medina, and he was teaching the people in Mecca and Medina, they began to learn about his da'wah. They accepted his da'wah. They accepted the da'wah of Tawheed. So when the people themselves accepted the correct way, they didn't want the rule of the Turkish Empire, the Ottomans. And this shows us how the Ottomans, what's the word? The lack of barakah, or the lack of blessings of spreading shirk and bid'ah and kufr and evil practices. That Allah takes away your authority. So, for example, the Ottomans, we have this organization in the West and in some other places called Hizb ut-Tahrir. It's a very political organization, just like Ikhwan al-Muslimun, and they talk, all their main goal is politics, and they're aiming for power and control. Okay, that's their da'wah. Their da'wah isn't to Kitab and Sunnah and Tawheed. Their da'wah is control and authority. So they say, oh, look, the Ottoman Khilafah, that's their da'wah. The Khilafah was, strong and stable, and it wasn't. It wasn't, because the rulers of the Ottoman Empire, they had their money in Western banks. They had their money in Western banks, even at that time. Even at that time, they had their finances in Western banks. They were getting riba. They were getting interest on that money. So it shows us that their spread of, haram practices, bid'ah, shirk, kufr, in Mecca and Medina. In Mecca and Medina, they had shrines that were built by the Ottomans. Allah was obviously going to take away their power. Allah was obviously going to take away their power and establish the power of Tawheed, the authority of Tawheed. So these accusations they make, like the Daesh, ISIS, and these terrorists and Taliban and these type of people that make these accusation that Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb rebelled against the Ottomans. This is not true. This is not true. This is just a summary of that accusation. Another accusation which we wanted, and we'll finish with that, is the accusation of being takfiri. Another accusation they make against Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb rahimahullah is the accusation they say that he was takfiri. Our brother Abu Ayyad, he's one of the main du'at in England and one of the most knowledgeable brothers you'll find in the West. He translated a statement from Shaykh Abdul Abbas. Shaykh Abdul Abbas, حفظه, is one of the great scholars of hadith in Medina, and he's very well known and established scholar on the way of the Sunnah. And he wrote he did an explanation of a book, and our brother Abu Ayyad translated this statement of the Shaykh, and you can find this on his site. And he has many sites. You can just Google it, accusation of being takfiri, Abu Ayyad. Salafi. You type this in and you'll find that on his website. And it's very important to read these type of these works that have been translations of the scholars. So he said, Shaykh Abdul Muhsin Abad, Hafidhullah, he said in his explanation, said, I have taken liberties in mentioning the quotes from Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb in corroborating this issue, which is that making takfir of a specific person who falls into shirk in worship due to his ignorance, that it only takes place after clarification to him and establishing the proof and not before that. So what the Shaykh was talking about how these people make accusation against Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab that he's a takfiri, that he kicks people outside the fold of Islam. This is not from his methodology. Rather, you find the scholars trying to keep the people into Islam. We're the ones that are trying to keep people into Islam, whereas these terrorists, Daesh, ISIS, Hizb ut-Tahrir, the Taliban, and these type of people, they want to kill Muslims and kick people out of Islam. Yeah, the Qutubis and these type of different sects, Sururis, what they try to do is they say, oh, this person, he committed a mistake, he's not a Muslim anymore, let's kill him. Yeah? Let's get rid of him. Subhanallah. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimullah and those upon the methodology of the Salaf, they want to keep people in Islam. We want to bring people in Islam. We don't want to get rid of people in Islam. So this accusation that they make, that he makes takfir, is not true. This is not true. So here Shaykh Abdul Muhsin Abad went to lengths to record the statements, the quotes of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab in this issue, that making takfir of a specific individual, generally this is different. If you said that a person commits major shirk, if a person commits major shirk, or when a person commits major shirk with knowledge, then this person is not a Muslim, because he's committed shirk. But he's talking about a person who falls into shirk due to his ignorance, because he doesn't know. He just doesn't know. That this only takes place after clarifying it to him, okay, and establishing the proof, and not before that. So before takfir is made, before we exit a Muslim, not us, sorry, scholars exit a Muslim from the deen of Islam, and the scholars mention, actually, Ibn Kathir and other scholars mention that this is the hardest thing for a scholar to do, they say. They said that this is the hardest thing for us to do, which is to exit a Muslim from the deen of Islam. Okay? So they said that this only takes place after clarification. You clarify this issue to them. This is shirk, you shouldn't do this because of this ayah, this hadith, and this is the situation. And establishing the proof that the person understands the proof, okay, and not before that. Shaykh Abdul Muhsin continues, he says, this is because from the ignoramuses and those jealous of him and his da'wah, which is based upon the book and the sunnah and that of the Salaf of the Ummah upon, were those who would revile him and divert others from his da'wah by accusing him of making takfir of the Muslims. So we find this situation amongst the non-Muslims in the West. Soon as a small situation occurs in Saudi Arabia, a small, maybe something internal, something to deal with the sovereignty of their own country, you find the non-Muslims jumping up and down, and in their newspapers, in their news, television, and their report, they start saying, look at this Wahhabi state, look at this, the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, they make takfir of the Muslim, they kick Muslims out of Islam. Actually, the non-Muslims are saying this. It shows us that they are enemies of the da'wah, okay, by accusing him of making takfir of the Muslims and making generalized takfir. But he, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, only makes takfir of the one whom the proof has been established. Only on the person who knows the evidences and the clear way has become clear to him. So this accusation of being takfiri is not correct. It's not correct. Rather, it's the opposite. And the takfiri are those of Ikhwan Muslimun, Hizb ut-Tahrir, and all these other Hizbi groups. It's not the da'wah of the Salafi. The da'wah of the Salafi is to cling on and call the people back to the correct path, correct methodology. So inshallah what we'll do, we'll end with this statement and continue next week, inshallah bi'idhnillah, looking at some other introductory points to the book before we even start the book. And this is very important, so we get a good understanding, a comprehensive understanding of the book, so we can study it and benefit more from this. So I would advise the brothers and sisters to actually read, if they can get access to it, the biography of Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhab, and you can find this on the site by the brother abukhadija.com. You'll find on his site, you'll find these articles, and it gives a good understanding to the background of the book and the situation. So when we learn it, we benefit more from it. We thank the brothers for who organized this lecture, and jazakumullahu khairan for listening. Barakallahu feekum. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu alayk.